I see the born of no return. Sister, hey now, can't you see we're rushing for the end? I see the point of no return. Now I see the point of no return. It's just ahead.
Well, good evening. It's Monday again, last day of March, 2014. My wife's birthday. I'd be in the doghouse, but I did take her out to a really nice dinner last night. So, those of you out there who have a significant other, you need to tattoo it to the inside of your eyelids so that you do not forget. And make sure that you... yeah, that's odd. Okay, getting complaints from some that there might be some dead air out there. Okay, I can see the meters moving, guys. So if you got dead air, take a look at your end, please. Needless to say, I was talking about the birthdays of significant others. Yes, if you want to maintain a happy relationship, it's a good idea to remember the birthday of that significant other out there who's so important to you. Keep them happy, because that's just what you're supposed to do. Besides that, it was a good excuse for me to get a nice dinner too. So got a lot of news items to cover tonight, but I think I'm going to be able to get through them fairly quick. So tonight, something I don't do very often. Tonight, during the last half of the show, I will invite a little audience participation. Really what I'd like to discuss is folks' opinions on the topical news items of the day. So as we proceed through the items that I've gleaned out of the news and I've determined were of significant interest to me, be thinking about what items you've heard the news over the last few days that you thought were important. Because, quite frankly, my opinion, what's important in the news is no more significant than yours. So if you want to jot down that dial-in number, it is 877-342-6673, and I will entertain callers in the last half, right after the first break. We have a break right around 28 minutes in, right after that first break. If you've got something on your mind, want to get something off your chest, tonight is your opportunity. First item of the night. Now, one of the recurring themes that we keep seeing is this idea that we might have two justice systems here in the United States. And I suspect, wherever you live, maybe you're in Europe, maybe you're in South America, maybe you're in Australia. If you really look closely, you might find that your judicial system where you live is somewhat similar. Well, we got confronted with another example of a dual justice system here in the United States just recently. Now, if you look at the picture that I've got over my shoulder in the video presentation of this, you might think I'm showing you a picture of, Guido, some mobster, some gangster from New Jersey who, sends Louis the leg breaker out if you don't pay your vig, But no, actually, this fellow is Robert H. Richards IV. Robert H. Richards IV. And he was put on trial here recently almost difficult for me to say, He was put on trial for raping his 3-year-old daughter. Now, that's just gross. I'm sorry. But that's just gross. I mean, a baby raper? Most folks, sitting around the bar talking about, a baby raper would be thinking, this guy should not be in jail. He should be under the jail. Right? Right? Well, a Superior Court judge determined that he would not fare well in prison and suggested that he needed treatment instead of time behind bars. How does that sit with you? What do you think? Now, if you knew for a fact you had a baby raper living in your neighborhood, you think maybe you might be talking with some of the boys at the bar and decide how many sticks of dynamite it would take to blow him to hell and back? Well, this fellow will not serve time in jail. He's going to get probation and treatment for his obvious sickness. Why, you say? Why is this guy not under the jail? Well, it turns out that Mr. Robert H. Richards IV, also known as the Baby Raper, is an heir to the DuPont fortune. Now, how does that sit with you? Is that cool? Is that how justice is supposed to be dispensed where you live? Baby rapers, good heavens. By the way, the judge in that case, Judge Jan Jurden, Jurden, Superior Court Judge Jan, Jan Jurden, Jurden. This case apparently went down in Connecticut. Now, there have been occasions where people have been found guilty of some sort of a crime or another, and they looked at him and, this person was so old or so frail or whatever that they decided, putting him in jail is like a death sentence, so some other form of punishment was determined. So that's not unusual, but typically that's done in drug offenses or, some sort of non-violent offense where, there wasn't any grieving victim. Okay? I don't think there has ever been a more significant case of misplaced justice than not throwing the book at that guy. But hey, that's my opinion. My opinion, and $5 get you a fancy coffee at that high-priced coffee place the yuppies go to. But it just seems kind of sad to me. As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to say it. Yes, okay, I'm sorry, but that is bullshit. There's just no other way to phrase it. If you're well-connected, you got plenty of money, you can get away with anything. I mean, you can get away with murder, you can get away with baby raping. So, if you're well-placed enough or got enough money, we have the best criminal justice system money can buy. All right, enough on that topic. Moving right along. For a long time here in the United States, we have had what a lot of people keep referring to as an immigration issue. Some look at the realities of the situation and believe that what we really have is a case of invasion. It's almost epidemic. Now, to be honest with you, I have no idea what the real numbers are. Some people say 11 million have jumped the borders illegally and are here thumbing their nose at our laws. Others say it might actually be as many as 30 million. I've even heard 50 million thrown around. Now, I don't know if it's that bad or not. Bottom line is, we've got a lot of people here in the United States who, by our current laws, should not be here. Okay? They seem to think they have some sort of special dispensation, that they can just walk across the border and take a job and set up housekeeping and basically enjoy liberties and freedoms here that they're not entitled to in their own nations. Now, my point of view has always been, look, if where you come from sucks so bad that you'd go through all that aggravation to come here, why don't you stay home and try and fix your own nation? I mean, there's a lot of us here in the United States trying to fix this one. We're not real happy with the way this country is going, and we would really like to get a handle on fixing our own country. How come you're not at home doing the same in your nation? Well, now, of course, the solution seems to be to give these folks retroactive immunity from prosecution for violating our laws. No matter what you think about illegal immigration or, border jumping or whatever the heck you want to call it, bottom line is, it's illegal. These people have violated our laws. So is the solution to an illegal act to retroactively give them a pass? Some say yes. Some say that is the way to solve our immigration problem. The fact remains that there is not a real clear effort on the part of those who are supposed to be enforcing our borders to do so as it is. So no matter what law you put in place, if it's inconvenient or not politically correct, it seems that those charged with enforcing that law just ignore it. Let's see here. Let's see how this is an article from the Washington Times. Immigration agents tried to deport only about a fourth of the cases they encountered in 2013. Only a fourth. Okay, so if they encountered 100 known illegal aliens, people who are in this nation illegally, they only tried to deport a quarter of them. So odds are pretty good. I mean, hey, you jump the border, you got a 75% probability that even if you get picked up, they're not going to kick you out. Of those let go, 68,000 had criminal convictions on their records. So not only were they here in this nation illegally, they had committed crimes here. Some of those crimes, violent crimes. And of those, 68,000 known criminals. Were just released. These numbers confirm that interior enforcement has been anything but tough, that, in fact, ICE is releasing more illegal aliens and more criminal aliens than they're trying to remove. The AIC said the more than 720,000 immigrants that ICE, that's Immigration Control, that's the Department of Homeland Security's people who handle immigrants, said that of the 720,000 immigrants ICE encountered, also likely included many illegal immigrants whose interaction with law enforcement was so minor that they were not even legally subject to removal. What does that mean? They're here illegally, but because they haven't killed anybody. Debate over deportation in meeting with immigrants, activist rights groups. The illegal immigrants have their own nonprofit rights organizations, I guess. Mr. Obama promised to devise more humane policies that would carve even more illegal immigrants out of deportation rules. So you've got to decide, okay? I mean, if we're not going to have borders, why try and enforce them at all? Hey, y'all, just y'all, come on down. Come on down. Now, is that cool with you? Is that okay? You know, I look to the Cuban community in Florida. All right, now I know what you guys had to go through to become American citizens. I know you had to go on the waiting list. I know you had to punch all the right tickets. I know you entered this nation legally. You've now got businesses. You're now well established. What, you want a bunch of wetbacks coming over here stealing your turf? What the heck is going on with you? How come the Latino community down in Florida, who earned their right to be here, who are honorable American citizens, how come you're standing for it? How come you have become part of the problem? How come you're not out there screaming at the top of your lungs, telling these people to either sign up to be legal immigrants or get the hell out? You ever been camping? I remember as a kid, I used to enjoy camping. Used to go out with my folks, we started out tent camping. Eventually we got a little travel trailer, but of course I was 12, 13 years old, so I didn't stay on the camping trailer with my old fuddy-duddy folks. I had my own little pup tent. We'd have the campfire and we'd roast the weenies and a marshmallow. It was a great time. Camping was a lot of fun. Until I got older. And now my idea of camping is the Holiday Inn because there's no room service, but that's neither here nor there. Well, this fella was not camping by choice. He was camping because, frankly, he had no place else to go. He's homeless, out of work, down and out, and some would say he's not a particularly nice fellow. He did indeed apparently threatened to kill some social worker at some point, trying to, I don't know, who knows? Sometimes these social workers get up in your face, get a little bit overbearing. I might threaten to kill them too if they didn't get away from me. Bottom line is he never committed a violent crime, although he did apparently threaten a few people, and he lived kind of outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico in a makeshift campground. And for his crime of camping on the king's land without a permit, he was recently confronted with what can only be described as military force. I mean, we're talking half a dozen officers armed to the teeth basically came and rousted him out of his campground. Now, he apparently tried to defuse the situation, said, look, man, I'm packing up my stuff. I'll get out of here. Okay, just leave me alone. I'm going to pack up my stuff. And they apparently had his backpack on his back, and he was starting to walk away when they shot a flashbang at him, sicked a dog on him. He tried to protect himself from the dogs with a couple of knives. He had a couple of good-sized hunting knives. No guns, but he had a couple of good-sized hunting knives, and he apparently did attempt to protect himself from the attack of the dogs. Well, apparently protecting yourselves from having your crotch chewed off by a dog, apparently that is enough to get the police to shoot you down. And they did shoot this man down. He's dead. Okay? His biggest crime was camping on the king's land without a permit and trying to protect himself from having his crotch chewed off by a dog. Now, this guy was not a nice man. Don't get me wrong. But the action of the police officers involved has to be questioned. Was it really necessary to gun down a man armed only with knives he was trying to protect himself from a dog with? Was it appropriate to shoot that man down? That's a tough one. And I am hearing the music in the background, so I'm going to ask you all to be patient while we sell some product. We'll be back right after these messages. And we're back from that break. I tell you, breaks are getting short. I didn't have time to finish my stogie. Okay, we were talking just before I left for that break. We were talking about this fellow named Boyd, who apparently was such a heinous, vicious camper that he was killed by Albuquerque, New Mexico police. There is a helmet cam video of this floating around out there on YouTube, but to be honest with you, I just can't bring myself to watch snuff films. I don't get any joy out of it. I think probably the still images that I have here are adequate. But you need to know some of the other players in this. Okay, now this fellow here is a fellow by the name of Keith Sandy. He was one of the police officers who apparently executed Mr. Boyd. This fellow here's name is Perez, I believe. Let me see here. Yeah, Dominique Perez. He was one of the other officers who apparently decided that this fellow Boyd was a serious enough criminal to summarily execute. And the fellow pictured over my shoulder right now, my apologies to those listening to this on the radio. I am presenting pictures in the video portion of this presentation. This is Police Chief Gordon Eden, who says that the conduct of these police officers was exemplary and that everything is hunky-dunky-dory fine and that you are being protected from evil campers by the Albuquerque, New Mexico Police Department. Now then, this isn't the first time that the cops in Albuquerque, New Mexico have gone nuts. Okay, apparently they've got a history of this. As a matter of fact, for such a small town, now, Albuquerque's not that big. You got 600,000 people living in Albuquerque and the surrounding areas. They've had what they call officer-involved shootings in Albuquerque, New Mexico that have claimed the lives of 20 people since 2010. That's kind of on the high side for a jurisdiction that's so small. And a lot of it kind of centers around the type of individuals that Albuquerque has chosen to hire for their police department. Just for example, these two fellows who were involved in this shooting, these guys had both been fired from other police departments for activities unbecoming of a police officer, but they were snapped right up by Albuquerque. And Albuquerque seems to have a method of training their police that some might consider a little over the top on the brutality scale. I mean, these guys are trained to shoot first and ask questions later. We are not talking about, Andy of Mayberry and Barney Fife here, all right? Now, the people of Albuquerque have apparently had enough. And they took to the streets. at least 500. So, the lowest number I've heard is 500. I've heard numbers as high as 2,000 residents of Albuquerque, New Mexico, took to the streets in what started to be a peaceful protest. And basically, they wanted to talk to the freaking mayor about what he was going to do about this. Okay? I mean, some of the folks in Albuquerque are downright pissed. There are people who are afraid to encounter the police for something as simple as a speeding violation because of the reputation of this police department for its violence and brutality. Well, whether it was agents provocateur or what, nobody really knows. There's a lot of accusations being thrown back and forth. But it appears that later in the evening on Sunday, just this past Sunday, as these protests were taking place, things did turn a little bit violent. Some of the protesters are apparently accused of, breaking windows and, beating on cars or whatever, property crimes. And reports are that at least a dozen, maybe more, were arrested. A lot of tear gas was tossed, and I think at least one individual was injured and taken to the hospital. One protester was injured. So the protests against the overt violence of the Albuquerque, New Mexico Police Department ended with the Albuquerque, New Mexico Police Department displaying violence against the protesters. That one's hard to call because I just don't know. I was not there. I've read 2 or 3 different reports on this incident. Some of them indicate that the police started wielding clubs, and it was only after the police started cracking heads that the protesters pushed back. And if that's how it went, more power to them. The militarization of police in the United States of America is starting to piss people off. Now, this past weekend, people in Albuquerque, New Mexico, galvanized over a single incident, got out in the street and got up in their faces. What's it gonna take to get you off your ass and into the streets? Does it have to happen to one of your neighbors? Does some guy who's not bothering anybody, sleeping under the overpass near you, have to be murdered by police for you to suddenly wake up and realize, oh my God, it can happen here? It is happening here. All too often. And these police that do these things, just like with the baby raper that I opened this segment with, just seem to get a pass. They just seem to get a pass. They do some of the most horrible things. Things that shock us. And instead of going to jail, they get a pass. Or maybe like, these 2 fellows who were involved in the shooting, maybe they get fired from one department, only to get picked up by another. Is that how it's supposed to work? What do you think? What do you think? The Albuquerque, New Mexico Police Department's website was taken down by Anonymous, apparently. There are active protests going on over that incident. People are starting to wake up. People are starting to get pissed. And when you push them, they're starting to push back. It's about time. Well, let's see. If I timed that right, I should be hearing the music. Ah, there it is. I thought I timed that segment just right. We've got another break. Got to sell some more product, so please do stand by. I'll be back in just a couple minutes. All righty, we're back from that last break of the evening. Now, I had offered to entertain your perspectives on what's going on out there. If you wish to avail yourself of a brief moment of fame and fortune on internet radio, you can dial in to 877-342-6673. But in lieu of any callers, I'm going to press right on with yet another interesting item in the news. I say false flag. What immediately comes to mind? You know, Twin Towers falling out of the sky, you know, I don't know, maybe, Gulf of Tonkin, remember the Maine. If I talk about false flag, what comes to mind? A lot of times, we've got to wait until 100 years after an incident, like, for example, the Maine. It was a darn Spanish torpedo. They sunk that boat in Havana Harbor, and that's a good excuse for us to go kick their butts. Yeah, right. Turns out it was a, coal explosion. The archaeologists finally figured it out. But Randolph Hearst wanted to rush us into war, so that was used as a good excuse to go to war. It's not very often that we find out about a false flag before it ever happens. But that's the case recently with a little excursion that was apparently planned by some uppers in Turkey. Yes, our valiant ally Turkey, yes, member of NATO and all-around honorable good guys who we trust with, our latest state-of-the-art weapons and we share intelligence with, and, good buddies, Turkey. Well, Turkey has been very supportive of the whatever you want to call them. Some say they're Al-Qaeda, some say they're Islamist militants, some say they're just mercenaries who couldn't find any other way to put food on the table and grabbed an AK-47 and pointed it at the guy they were told to point it at because, they couldn't find any other gig. Whatever you call them, Turkey has been very supportive of this bunch of guys who have been attempting to overthrow the elected government of Syria. Now, there are many out there who are going to say, well, the elected government of Syria is actually a despot whose, parents ran the earth out, now they're running it, so it seems more like a kingship. And then, of course, I got to think in terms of Bush, another Bush maybe? No, please, not another Bush, anything but another Bush. So, we have these political dynasties here in the United States, much like they have in Syria. But it's okay when we do it. It's just when they do it, it's bad. But anyway, regardless of what you think of the government of Syria, they are a sovereign nation, and they are deserving of respect. They have the respect of most of their neighbors, but Turkey, being a good, loyal buddy of the United States, and seeing as how the United States and Israel really want to go kick Syria's butt, Turkey has been all in favor of kicking butt. Well, it came out recently, a recording was released. Now, where this recording came from, nobody really knows for sure. Is the recording authentic? Most people nod their heads and say, yeah, it appears to be authentic. Okay, what time frame are we talking about here? Well, nobody seems to be able to nail it down specifically, but apparently the discussion held between these movers and shakers in Turkey took place sometime late in 2013 or early in 2014. Well, what is the big deal about it? Well, these boys were discussing how convenient it would be if some Turkish military units, or if perhaps some high-profile Turkish property, took fire from the Syrian side of the border, and how best they could take advantage of such a situation to enter a war with Syria. Yeah, they were talking behind the scenes about how they could put together a false flag incident that would justify them marching on Damascus. Isn't that precious? Now, these are not low-level bureaucrats who are involved in this discussion. These are the upper crust. They're basically sitting there running possibilities, talking about, strategic plans, just waiting for Erdogan, their dictator in charge or president or head poobah, whatever he's called in Turkey. They're just waiting for him to pass judgment on what they're supposed to do. Okay, they're making all sorts of contingency plans over how they're going to pull this off if Erdogan looks at him and says, go. Now, apparently, the recordings of this conversation were released on YouTube. And apparently, links to the YouTube recording were offered up on Twitter. So, if you were in charge in Turkey and you found this material to be embarrassing, what would you do? You're damn right. They apparently cut off access to Twitter and to YouTube in Turkey. Well, how come I haven't heard about this on CNN? And how come I haven't heard about this on MSNBC? If this is for real, how come the big boys aren't reporting? Well, they did. They did report it. But the only thing that they put out there was that Turkey, for some reason or another, had cut off access to YouTube and Twitter. That was their big lead. That was their big storyline. They completely ignored the fact that what was discussed in these recordings was planning for a false flag attack that would justify Turkey entering a war with Syria. Now, some other little nifty things were discussed, like the fact that they had provided 2,000 truckloads of weapons and ammunition to the insurgents in Syria. So a lot of discussion in this recording. As a matter of fact, I've looked at, you kind of have to watch it on YouTube because, of course, these guys are talking in a language that a poor old Southern boy with straw for brains couldn't understand. The YouTube recording of this discussion has subtitles in English, so I can read it. Here again, I can't verify to you that the translation is accurate. But many people who do understand both languages have looked at it and said, yeah, the language is properly translated into English. So if you read the subtitles, you are getting the gist of what they're discussing. People who know the players involved are saying, yeah, I know that voice. That's so-and-so. Yep, I recognize this voice. That's such and such. So it appears that the recording is authentic, and it appears that the English translation is accurate. So what we have here, for the first time I can remember, is information regarding advanced planning by a government to conduct a false flag operation in order to draw themselves into a conflict with another nation. Something that many have assumed has gone on for a long, long time. We've seen so many, but usually we get to put all the pieces together after the fact. Well, gee, some towers fell down in New York City. Whose ass we going to kick? I know. Let's go kick Afghanistan. Let's go kick Iraq. What do you mean they didn't have anything to do with it? Who cares? We got to kick somebody's ass. Some buildings fell down. And usually it takes us a little while. We got to look at everything. We got to investigate. People have got to consider all the various possibilities before they can put all the pieces together and say, we have no idea who knocked those buildings down. One thing we do know for sure is it wasn't any Afghans and it wasn't any Iraqis. So what the hell did we kick their ass for? Oh, that's right. Oil, lithium. I am so naive sometimes. I forget these things. But that means that the criminals who knocked those towers down are still running around free. And we killed a couple of million people for no good reason. Oh my God. This time, we have an opportunity to look these SOBs square in the eye and say, what are you thinking? You would drop bombs on your own people or on your own property as an excuse to go kick your neighbor's ass? That's twisted. But before we hold the Turks too much to blame, probably not a bad idea to take a look in our own backyard. What do you think? A couple of notes from people who know more about this than I do. The major points that this particular fellow had, he's an expert. I have to kind of, I read 3 or 4 or 5 different experts' opinions on the thing, and I try to synthesize what makes the most sense. But these are facts that came out of the discussion. Turkey has delivered 2,000 truckloads of weapons and ammunition to the insurgents in Syria. There are plans for false flag attacks on Turkey or Turkish property to justify an attack from Turkey on Syria. The Turkish military has great concerns going into and fighting Syria. Bottom line is they're not 100% sure they can win. The general atmosphere between these deciders is one of indecisiveness. Basically, they're running scenarios. They're not real sure they're going to be able to pull it off. But, they are considering these possibilities, but they are indecisive. Everyone seems to be unclear what Erdogan wants. Erdogan is the boss. He's the Don. Okay? He's the Don of this particular mob. Everybody's waiting for clear orders from above. U.S. military has shortly before the meeting presented fresh plans for a no-fly zone over Syria. So, one of the things they're discussing is, can we count on the U.S. to keep the Syrian Air Force on the ground so that we can just, roll in with tanks and troops and kick their butts? Because apparently, if Syria's air power gets up there, could be more of a fight than they want to take on. I don't know what to tell you on this one, but it is an example of a government making such plans. And this time, we got to hear about it in advance before they actually pulled it off, not 10 years later. Well, folks, I'm hearing the music in the background. It's that time. They're going to jerk me off the stage. Hope you all have a good evening. Thanks for listening, and you betcha we'll be back next Monday with some more Wide Awake news. Good night, y'all.
What will you say? What out to you. Won't you turn around? Oh, I'm calling out to you. Won't you won't you turn around? Oh, the point of no return is just ahead now.